All right, boys and girls, so I just want to talk today about doing unit fractions with a number line. And I want us to think back to the model that Ms. Meyer had shown us when using fractions. So remember, sometimes we're sharing a garden or a piece of cake or a pizza, right? But we need those shares always to be equal. And when we look and we have those equal shares, we know that those are parts of a whole. Now, if this were my whole, and I know that 4 parts make my whole, I know that 4 is going to be my denominator, because those 1, 2, 3, 4 parts make up my whole. But with a unit fraction, if we remember, we are only looking at one part of the entire whole, or in this case, it would be 1 out of 4, or 1/4 of the whole. The same is true with any denominator that we use. If we take our whole and we divide it either into thirds, halves, sixths, right? And we break those into even equal shares. Remember, they need to be equal because we like to make sure that everyone gets the same amount. I know that this has 1, 2, 3 parts that make up the whole. So that's going to be my denominator. And when I'm talking about a unit fraction, remember, I'm looking at one part of the entire whole. So we've seen that with models, and Ms. Meyer talked about it earlier this week. But what we're going to be doing today is actually looking at how we represent those unit fractions with a number line. So let's take our 1/4, for example. I'm going to erase our third so we don't get confused. And we've seen number lines when we multiply, when we add, and there's always a starting point and an ending point. Well, when we are doing fractions, we have a starting and ending point, just like with any number line. Our starting point is usually 0. And in this case, since I don't make more than one whole, my ending point is going to be one whole. Now, when I divide up my number line, I want to make sure, just like with my models for fractions, that they are equal parts, right? And if I'm breaking it up and this whole has 4 equal parts, I need to make sure my number line has 4 equal parts. So here I know that this is 1 part out of 4. This is 1 part out of 4. This is 1 part out of 4. And this part is 1 part out of 4. And when I have that and I can look, I know that this is 1 whole part out of 4, right? And I can label my number line, that first mark is 1/4 because that's the first part out of the whole. But if I continue counting on my number line, just like we would with any number line, we have 1 part out of 4 and 2 parts out of 4, because notice we made 2 jumps, and I'll highlight that in a different color as to why that's 2/4. So if we see that we have 1 part out of 4, 2 parts out of 4, right? And that gives us that 2/4. And if I continue down my number line, not only do I have 1 part out of 4, 2 parts out of 4, now if I add this next part, that's 3 parts out of 4 to make my next mark on my number line. And if I were to continue, I know that this endpoint is 1 whole, but just for the sake of looking at it, I have 1 part out of 4, 2 parts out of 4, 3 parts out of 4, and this last one to make my whole is my 4 parts out of 4, right? But we're looking at what the unit fraction, or the 1 part of the entire number line, would be. And so when we do that, we actually, and I'll put it in orange, we're going to look at starting at 0 and just labeling this first part. And if I look at what that first part ends at, it ends at what number? It ends, and I put a dot there, at 1/4. So on this number line, to label this fraction, which we know is 1/4, we just draw across our number line to that first part, and we get 1/4. Now I'm going to show you another one because I know that was a lot of explaining. And we're going to go ahead and look at a model with thirds. Okay, so I'm going to draw my model to make sure I understand. I've got 1 equal part, 2 equal parts, 3 equal parts. And let's say I shade in my one part. I only need one piece of this cake, one piece of this pizza, right? To write that fraction, I would say that that is 1 out of 1, 2, 3 pieces that make my whole, or 1/3. If I were to make my number line, again, I'm going to draw that number line. I'm going to start at 0, end at 1 whole, right? And I know that that whole has not 1, not 2, but 3 pieces total. Then I know I need to have 1 piece, 2 pieces, and 3 pieces. I know they don't look exactly equal. Bear with me, I'm doing it on a computer. And I would go ahead and count. This 1 piece is 1 piece out of 3, right? There's 1 piece out of 3 total pieces. This next piece, if I'm starting at my 0, I have 1, 2 out of, or 3 pieces, right? Or 2/3. And this last piece makes it a whole number line, or 1, 2, 3 out of 3 pieces, right? But I'm asked to just show one part of the number line. So I'm going to take my writing utensil. Look at this brown color right now. And I'm just going to look for the first piece. This is my first piece right here. See how I'm coloring it in so you can see where it is? So if I took, I'll take black. If I look at this first piece, I notice that it ends at this line right here. And if I look at my label, that's going to give me what? 1/3. And so therefore I put my little mark on it, and I know that that first piece, or that unit fraction, is 1/3, or 1 out of 3 pieces. And you can see that when we begin to look at problems, it'll say, we'll do an example here. If we write that Mrs. Wackus was given a number line broken into 6 pieces, where would her unit fraction, or first part of the whole be? And they'll word a question like that, and you might see a number line that's drawn like this, right? And let's say I know that I'm going to always start at my 0 and end at my 1 whole. And it's broken into 6 parts. So now I have to make 6 equal parts. So it's usually easier if I go, here's 1 part, 2 parts, 3 parts, 4, 5, 6 parts, right? But I have to now label that. I've got 1 part out of 6, because that's 1 jump. The second jump is 2 parts out of 6, then I keep counting. 3 out of 6, keep counting. 4 out of 6, and then 5 out of 6. And if I go to that whole, that would have been 6 out of 6, right? And I want to label that first part of the whole, or my unit fraction. So I'm going to look, and I'm just going to look for that first jump. Oh, that ends right here. So my answer would be 1/6. You're going to see some questions phrased like this. I might ask you to find the number line that has the unit fraction or the one part out of the whole labeled. And we're going to go ahead and start looking at how we take that model Ms. Meyer showed you and just apply it to a number line. If you have any questions, we will be having our Zoom calls at 11, so feel free to get on. And Ms. Meyer and I are always available if you have any questions to show on Edsby. And remember, you can always rewatch this video if you need to.